Welcome to the King Connections podcast. I'm your host, King, and today I'm joined by speaker, coach, author, and marriage strategist Oliver Marcelle. How you doing today, Oliver?
I'm well, man. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and in this space with you and have this conversation. I don't take it lightly when these opportunities present themselves. So thank you so much. Honored to be here.
Well, I appreciate your investment of time and energy with being here as well. Just before we begin, one of the things I like to always ask people who I'm interviewing, or even when I'm at meetings, is what's your spiritual energy number? And that what I mean by that is 0 being life sucks to 10 being life is awesome. Where would you say you fall in that spectrum right now?
First of all, that's a phenomenal question. And I may need to borrow that
feel
from you
feel free.
at some
Feel free.
point. That's a phenomenal question. And if I'm being very honest with the answer, I would say that it fluctuates for me. And I'd
Mm,
say it would probably fluctuate somewhere between 7 and 9.
mm,
And to give some context around that, and it'll probably come out in our conversation. I'm going through a process of self discovery. It's ongoing, right?
mm,
And literally, just recently, having a conversation about happiness
mm.
and the fact that there's a Buddhist quote that says there's no path to happiness. Happiness is the path.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
I've been on this journey, especially during the entrepreneurial stage that I find myself in, season I find myself in. I'm on this journey to move towards 10 based on some of the things that I'm doing in here in my heart. So I'd say right now in that process as I'm growing, I kind of do this a little bit. 7, 8, 9. Great day. 7, 8. So that's where I'm at. So let's call it 8 to be average.
Appreciate that. And thank you for your answer and indulging me with that question. But
Yeah, absolutely.
the reason I asked that question is I've learned, and what I believe is that, Albert Einstein, and I'm definitely a student of his, he says that energy is everything and everything is energy, period. And so in that context, what I do when I have meetings or when I have my events, I always ask that question because I don't want folks who are twos or threes in the audience,
Mhm.
or have a meeting with someone who's a two or three. And I'm asking in that moment, not someone whose lifestyle, your lifetime, but just in that moment, because most people with two or threes are not going to be present. They're going to be adversarial,
True.
and they're not going to be engaged. So it's
True.
like, why waste the energy of even having this meeting? You just might as well just go home, work out what you need to work out. But people who are sevens or better, that to me means a person's going to be engaged. They're open for the discussion. Seeds can be planted, and then that's where the infinite possibilities of co-creation can come. So that's why I asked that question. So again, I want to thank you for indulging me with that. And
Absolutely.
and then I'll finally want to add this piece real quick because you mentioned about happiness, and I just really uh, reread a book. I've read it before and I've read it multiple times, but this particular portion about happiness came out of this book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, which I highly recommend the folks to read. Um, and anyway, he talks about happiness is not something you can pursue.
Hmm.
Like the movie it came out, Pursue Happiness, it's something you ensue, meaning it's internal in you.
Yeah,
And to
that's
your
good.
point, that if you try to pursue it, it will always evade you, avoid
That's
you,
good.
right? But
Yeah.
if you ensue it because you instill that I'm happy already, then you exude happiness in what you do, and then the world around you fulfills happiness around you, right?
I love it. Yep.
And that's the path I'm on. But every day we got to go through what it makes to ensue it, though, right? It's not just
Exactly.
you just
Right.
turn that switch on and yeah, I'm happy. It's you got to figure out what it is. And so I definitely thank you for this discussion because that's definitely the path I'm on, is
Absolutely.
that self mastery path. Absolutely. And that leads to my very first question. Actually, it's an excellent segue into my first question, which is, what do you see as your purpose in life?
Well, that's over the last few years I've discovered that my purpose in life is to actually do what's on my t-shirt. So
Mm,
my t-shirt says 2020 before hindsight.
mm,
And I, based on the decisions that I've made in the past, based on circle of individuals that I found myself in, based on a lot of different circumstances that lead back to the choices that I made. Because of some of those, I'm living in hindsight today in some areas. I told somebody not too long ago, I'm paying for mistakes that I made. There's some mistakes I made in my 20s that I'm literally paying for today.
Mm,
Still,
mm.
I'm still paying out for. And my purpose in life is to help somebody gain some level of clarity on the front end before they run into some scenarios, make some choices, get with some folks that could potentially throw off the trajectory of their life. Get them some level of 2020. So in my book, I dedicate some of the book to my son, and I say, may you achieve 2020 long before hindsight. And so that's my
Mm.
purpose, man, just to share my journey in hopes that it will encourage and inspire others and see them bypass some of the pitfalls, man, that could keep them from thriving.
That's a powerful purpose, man. I love this T-shirt, by the way, and I love
Yeah, thank you.
the slogan and the purpose behind it. Because you're absolutely right, man. I tell folks that what I've learned by going through different decades, because now I'm in my 50s, is that, you know, your 20s is a decade that, society allows you to make mistakes,
Right.
because you're just coming out of teenage years where you no longer have your parents' oversight as much. And you're allowed to go out here and make your own decisions because now you think you're a teenager, you think you're grown. Your
Hmm.
20s give you a chance to try to figure out how grown you really are.
Right.
But prayerfully, you don't make too many bad mistakes that you can't recover from those mistakes, right?
Indeed.
You
Indeed.
know, so society, by the time you're 30, society is not forgiving you for mistakes at that point. It's like you
That's
should have
right.
gotten your life together, and now it's coming at you, whether it's going to be a criminal justice system, the financial system, the education system. One of those systems is going to come at you hard as a result of decisions you made in your 20s.
Right. That's right. And so we have to. That's why I love working with. I, I work with all men in various areas of their lives, but I love working with young men
Mm,
because fresh ideas, a ton of energy, the world is their oyster kind of thing, and the gift and curse of that is that if cultivated properly and guided well, the sky's the limit. If put in the wrong into the wrong use and given the wrong focus and taking all of that energy in a different direction, it digs a hole that is very tough to get out of. It's not impossible, but you spend a lot of your 30s and sometimes your 40s, depending on how bad those mistakes were,
absolutely,
digging out of
absolutely,
those things, right? So now you're using that energy that could have elevated you to just get you back to the starting point.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And this next question I have for you, and it's a question I ask folks because I'm involved in this conscious capitalism movement,
Hmm.
and that term nowadays in business is thrown around quite a bit. Conscious,
Yeah.
and it has a different meaning depending on who you ask, and that's why I always ask individuals who I deem myself to be conscious leaders, like yourself, who are exhibiting those behaviors and those characteristics. But I'm always curious to know how you define a conscious leader. So how would you define a conscious leader?
I would say, to give a shotgun definition, if you will, it when I think about that, hearing you say that, I'm thinking about someone who has chosen to be intentional about being aware.
Hmm.
Because often we have leaders who they know what their vision is, and they sometimes make the mistake of pursuing that at all costs and at the expense of all things. So I want to get where I need to go. I know where it needs to happen. I'm going to do this at the expense of King, or I'm going to do this in spite of King, right? I'm going to
Right.
railroad if I have to, instead of being aware of what it is that you bring, how it is that you fit into this vision. What can I do to empower you to utilize the skills and the things that you bring to the table, because I've taken time to recognize that in you. I've taken time to be aware of who you are and what your needs are and the things that are important to you and the things that motivate you to prioritize the thing that's important to me.
Mm.
And I think that that's important. And sometimes we don't do that. We expect some things from folks as leaders, but we don't take the time to invest in them the energies that's necessary to understand how they can even lend to our vision and give and have the capacity to help us fulfill our vision. And I
Right.
apologize. Today would be the day that the guys come to do the yard. So if you hear anything in the background, that's what that is. But yeah, that's what I think of as a conscious leader, somebody who is aware, who's taking the time to be intentional and taking the time to really dig in and understand the folk that they're responsible for as it relates to this vision happening.
I love that. I love the definition. You say responsible for. People understand they are responsible for others.
Yep.
Being that leader. One of the books that I'm reading now, and I really have shifted my advocacy and my work towards, it's called Spiritual Capitalism. And it's 10 commandments. I'm not going to go through all of them right now, but one of the commandments that relates to where we are right now, it talks about leadership is a sacred responsibility. And that's when you really understand that you have a role as a leader to really guide and direct individuals who are either your direct reports, your employees, your team, or whatever it is you're leading, but you accept it as a sacred responsibility. And that changes your behaviors when you understand it in that context.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
Now, I know that you mentioned you're a father,
Hmm.
you're a husband, you're a speaker, you're author, you also are a coach, and you've gone through a gamut of other decisions and things, successes you have in your life. But I'm curious to know, what you would say that you're most grateful for in your life?
Man, this is there's a couple of things, but if I had to pull out one, I'm going to say something I just said recently because it's in at the top of mind. I'm grateful for the fact that I have a partner who treats me like the man that I should be.
Mm, mm,
Now, that's tough. That's a concept that's tough to explain to somebody because there's some vulnerability involved in that. There's some chance taking involved in that, in treating somebody like they should be, because you don't necessarily know what the return on your investment is going to be. You don't know if the ROI is going to be right or not.
right.
But what it's done for me is that it has motivated me to live up to that treatment.
Mm, mm,
And I was telling, and the reason why it's top of mind, I was telling a young man, he's been married just I think over a year, just a little over a year, and I was explaining to him, listen, if if I put a crown on somebody's head consistently every day, you get up in the morning, I put this crown on you, and I'm treating you kingly, and I put you on a throne, at some point, what that should do is make you wake up and be like, okay, wait a minute, how does a king act? What are the ideologies of a king? Like, how do I live this thing out? And that's what it did for me. So that's something that I'm very grateful for. It has been part of the motivating force in me continuing to go through this journey of self-discovery that I've been on for the last several years.
I love it. That's definitely powerful in the context. And I love how you said treating you as you should be, right?
Mhm.
Where you hear the golden rule, treat someone as you want to be treated.
Right.
But they may not be want to be treated the way you want to be treated, right? As you said, treat them as they should. That's important. It's distinction.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
definitely love that. Now, what are three behavior traits that you would say that you possess that best describe who you are as an individual?
Three traits. I would say the first one I would say is I guess you could categorize it as tenacity.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not willing to give up.
Hmm.
And that could be good or bad. That could be a
Right.
good trait and a bad trait, depending on the circumstance. But I tend to see something And even if I run into some snags here and there, I'm like, all right, how do we get past this? Like, I'm not willing to allow this thing to get me. And that has helped me accomplish some things that I thought I would not have maybe accomplished, or been successful at. And so that's one trait. I'd say the other trait is it's one that I am still developing, and it is the trait of listening.
Mm.
I have done some significant work over the last 10 years to really become a better listener. And I always felt like I was a great listener. I'd have people even before I got married and was dating, people like, "Oh man, you're such a great listener. You just let me talk and talk and talk." But I wasn't always listening for I wasn't always listening to understand.
Right. Right.
Sometimes let's be honest, in my younger years, I was listening with some level of intent that was selfish in nature.
Hmm.
Like I'm trying to get to a point, or I'm trying to look for an opening where I'm like, okay, this is where I fit in. But over the years, man, just learning how to listen and really use active listening techniques and active listening responses, and uh, really making individuals feel acknowledged and heard and validated in the way that I listen. I've gotten I'm not there yet, but I've gotten significantly better in that area. And then the third thing would be, I guess you could call this a character trait. I'm a family guy. I believe in family, and I believe in the power that comes with really digging in and being intentional about being present, and about spending time, and about building intimacy, and about enjoying intimate moments. And I'm not just saying intimacy in the context of, marriage and sex and that excuse me, that kind of thing, but just the laughter that happens in the home, and just being able to really rest in that. And I haven't always done that. I've been a guy who has always been thinking about how to protect, how to provide, you know, how to fill the void, how to take care of the lack. And because of that, I've missed sometimes those precious moments that were right in front of me. And so I'm learning to embrace that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Love that answer. Love those descriptions as well. Those traits you just broke down. That's a great segue into my next question, which is your company. And I'm curious to know what inspired you to create, and correct me if I'm mispronouncing, but Denola,
Denali.
Denali
Mhm.
LLC.
So, so to give you context around the name, Denali LLC is simply the first three letters of my wife's name. Her name is Denise, and the
Okay.
first three letters of my name, Oliver. So Denali LLC, and there's a story behind how that name even came about. But the thing that moved us to do this was we were always no, that's not true. I was gonna say we were always kind of, you know, in that space, but we really weren't. We were in a marriage group several years ago, and we were the participants in this marriage group. And people would come to us often, to my wife in particular, and say, "Man, we love your relationship. Just looks like you guys are so engaged with each other. You joke, you laugh. You're just having such a it just we love your marriage. We love your relationship." And often I would look at my wife and be like, "They do realize we're here for the same reason they are." Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, I get it, and I'm grateful. That sounds fine, but we're walking this thing just like everybody else. But it kept happening,
Hmm.
and so fast forward, we started to see ourselves in scenarios where we were giving tips and where we were giving advice, and people were kind of coming to us for different things, and that just mushroomed into some things, and we realized, wait a minute, God has more for us in this. It's not just about us, kind of brushing this thing off with an answer here and there. Or I created a blog at one point and was like, this is the only thing that's going to happen in this space. We're going to create a blog. What I'm really trying to do is learn how to build a website. So I'm going to learn how to build a website, but we'll double it as a blog, and then we'll just talk about our marriage there, and that's it. And then it just began to grow into some other things, man. And we realized that's, you talked about purpose in the beginning. We realized, man, that there, our purpose and our passion is tied up in this, and it's tied up in us being vulnerable about our journey in this quest to help other folk walk out their journey in a very specific way, man. And so we said, you know what, let's move this thing from a hobby, quote unquote, or just this fly by night kind of thing, to really digging in and doing something with this. Let's get the coaching certifications. Let's create the business, the business model. Let's go ahead and dig into this thing, because if this is what we have been called to do, let's figure out how to do it correctly. And that's how that came about.
Beautiful, beautiful. You know, now I know that you, as a marriage strategist, you and your wife, that provide counseling to married couples. So I'm just curious, what are some of the marriage strategies that you all help couples to kind of make or overcome?
Sure. I would say if we were to survey all of the couples that we've had the privilege to serve, I'd say that 90% of them, the goals that they have for their relationship, the pain points, the areas of interest, or where they want to discover more, fall into two categories: either communicating effectively or communicating without judgment and frustration, and building intimacy holistically. And so we spend a lot of work with couples going through and identifying communication styles, identifying how they like to be communicated to, and crafting strategies around that, using real world scenarios, using pain points and unproductive conversations that they've had, to really help them design a blueprint that allows them to use the components of effective conversation, like explanation, clarification, and negotiation. And we really dig through that, and they come out on the other side of that really understanding each other in terms of how they communicate, and then being able to walk through some of these productive conversations, being able to manage conflict much better and recover faster. And so we do a lot of work in that area. And then on the intimacy building side, there's a whole range of things, right? Because often people think sex, and that's one end of the spectrum. But then there's all of these other things. There's emotional and physical, that's non-sexual, and spiritual and experiential and intellectual, and all of these areas that are, being intentional in those areas are conducive to your bond. And so we do some work in that area as well, in crafting a strategy that allows them to really build and see themselves bond in real time, and see that intimacy level grow. And so those are two areas that we really dig into quite often based on our clientele.
Excellent, excellent. Now, you're also an author,
Yes.
and as an aspiring working author right now myself, I'm always curious to know what inspired someone to become an author, because it's not an easy path to undertake it all.
Yeah. It's so for me, my inspiration, it's something that was on a bucket list for me, truth be told, right? But the inspiration came out of a seminar that I did. So a few years back, 2017, I think it was, I was a breakout speaker at a singles retreat. And so when they split the men and the women for these breakout sessions, I took the men and I talked about the unwritten man rules. And I was sharing 5 lessons that I've learned over the course of my time as a husband and father that I think are beneficial lessons to really kind of dig in. And if you can get some of these things ahead of the mistakes that I've made, then it may set you up for success. And when I was done with that, when I got home, I told my wife, I was like, man, you know what? I think this could make a good book. Like, this is something that maybe I need to share with, a lot of folks. And so I started writing at that time, but I'm not going to say I wasn't serious, but I was writing alongside life happening. So I
Mm.
wrote consistently for about 3 months, put it down for probably the next 8 or 9. And that just kept happening over and over and over. And then when the pandemic hit, I was still in the corporate space while I was doing this as well. Um, when the pandemic hit, obviously everybody's home, they're working from home. I had more time to kind of finagle my schedule and do some different things that allowed me to pull time from here and take it, rob Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. And so I was able to finish it then. But that was the inspiration, man. Just after sharing that and the discussion that generated from that and the feedback that came from that, I was like, okay, yeah, I, I'm willing to share my journey of self discovery. So let's put pen to paper and see what happens.
Beautiful. Now, the next question I'm going to ask is a question that I recently thought this about myself, and I realized that this is something I'm looking forward to connecting with people I'm building with, right? That I'm connecting to, and that is this question around commitment. And so, my question would be, what are you most committed to?
That's good. I'd say at this seat in this season of my life, hmm, I'm most committed to family.
Hmm.
Family. So the reason why I kind of I'm fumbling with it a little bit is because I'm extremely committed to seeing this business thrive.
Right.
Now, I'm also in that I'm also kind of grappling with what success looks like for me in that area. But what edges that out is the why that I want to see this thing thrive, and the why points back to family. There's some things that I want to experience with my family because of the support that they've given me. So I'm very committed to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Now, as we kind of shift to, relationship building, and I'm always curious to know what people's thoughts are about co-creating with others to help achieve these higher purposes that we have in our lives that we know are beyond just our own skill sets and competence, but we also have to tap into the ability of aligning ourselves with others and co-creating. So how do you feel about co-creation with others?
So I'll sum it up in an African proverb that I quote often, which is, if you want to go fast, go alone.
Mm.
If you want to go far, go together.
Mm.
That's my philosophy. Like, I can't do this by myself, or I can do it to a certain degree by myself, but I will only get so far. My impact will only have so much reach. My fulfillment will only be so great
Mm.
if I'm doing it by myself. But if I'm like, hey, King, let's do this. Hey, so and so, let's do this. Or hey, King, meet so and so and do that. Now you begin to ripple affect your reach. You begin to ripple affect your impact, your influence, your level of fulfillment grows as that grows as well. And listen, at the core, you make some great relationships and you build some friendships and you are able to learn and grow because another quote that goes around often is you're the average of the five people that you associate with the
Mm-hmm.
most, right? And so if you're associating with no one and you're not collaborating with anyone and you're hoarding, you're only going to get but so far because you are your point of reference. So me hanging out with you allows me to grow and learn from you and observe and train possibly and then execute and get great feedback from you, which grows me as a person. And I do the same for you. And you just it's no, that's the way to live. Like that's my answer to that. That's the way to live. That's how you got to live life.
Now, you mentioned a word in your answer which is excellent for my next question, is fulfillment. So I'm curious to know, what do you do in your life that brings you the most fulfillment?
Um, and people are gonna be like, "Man, is this the answer for everything?" And honestly, there are a few things that give me fulfillment, man. But I'm like I said in the beginning when we were talking about the traits, man. I'm a family guy, and
Mm.
so there are some times, man, where I'm just like, all I need is just to be surrounded by them and hear the noise and the laughter and the jokes and eat some good food and, you know, share the moments, you know. And so for me, man, I get a great sense of fulfillment around spending that time. There are certain things we look forward to, and some of them are very quote unquote insignificant in the grand scheme of things. I'll give you one in particular. Typically on Saturdays, right? My wife and I, sometimes my son, who's 19, will join us as well. Man, we'll just jump in the car, man, and just drive. No destination. Just be like, we're going to drive north for an hour, and then we're going to come back the scenic route. So that's a
Mm.
2 hour drive, right? And we're gonna listen to music, we're gonna laugh, we're gonna talk, we're gonna do all this kind of stuff, man. We've grown to look forward to that time now. So it's almost like when if I have things to do, like speaking engagements or things like that, I'm like, oh man, I wonder can I schedule this in the morning so we can still get our drive in? You know, it's just, you know, so I'm that kind of guy, man, where I'm looking now for those things that are priceless in nature to get fulfillment from.
I love that answer. We as black men are not typical in that answer. So the more you talk about family, I'm glad you're saying that. So for somebody who's listening, who's thinking that that's the answer you keep giving for each answer, I think it's beautiful because our culture and these systems that we grew up in make it so that we don't think that way.
Right.
So I'm glad that you are in that alignment with your family because, as you're right, um, being with family is one of the greatest things we can have, and sharing those moments is one of the great things. And I loved how you talk about just with no destination. One of my favorite books that I love to read is The Seven Spiritual Laws of Success
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
by Deepak Chopra. And he talks about the law of detachment. Detach yourself from the outcome. And when you say we're just gonna drive, right? So it's a journey, it's a process we're going through. It's not so much where we're going, it's just the fact that we're going together
Right.
and what we're gonna experience on this journey
On
is
the
that's
way. Yep.
on the way. So
Yep.
that's beautiful.
And let me be clear for those of you who are listening, I haven't always been this way. I'm growing. I am a work in progress. Trust me when I say
Right.
that. I'm a work in progress. And over the years, I have learned how significant that is to my personal journey.
Mm.
Right. And so it's not that I've just always been this guy who has these answers, man. I've gone through a process of self discovery and self actualization that is still ever evolving. And those are some of the realizations that I've just had along the way.
Mm. But I definitely appreciate you sharing. Now, on a given day, us as individuals, grown men, leaders, we make over 1,000 decisions. And through a lifetime, we make over trillions of decisions that we make. I'm curious to know, has there been one decision that you can think about that has been the most significant and most impactful in your life?
Um, I'll give you two. One goes all the way back to when this whole process started. I was, again, like I said just now, I haven't always been like this. When I got married, I got married for very selfish reasons. I was really looking at it, how it can, benefit me. And then on the flip side of how it can benefit me, I was also trying to live a very singular life while being in a scenario where duality is supposed to be at the top of mind.
Hmm.
And as anyone who's listening, as you can, probably imagine, that's not conducive to a successful relationship. So maybe about 18 months, maybe a little under 2 years in, man, I had this epiphany, and our girls were young at the time. And coming in from this, yeah, I'm still living this, singular lifestyle. So I'm coming in one morning like 4 a.m. And the short version of the story is I have this epiphany where this question pops into my mind. And I'm like, if those two little girls that are sleeping down the hall, if they grow up and bring a version of you currently, bring a version of you home, how are you going to feel about that?
Hmm.
And me being a recovering hothead, obviously in my mind, I was like, oh, yeah, that ain't going to happen. Only one of us can be here, and it ain't going to be them. Right.
Right,
But
right.
then the next question that pops in my mind is, okay, if you're so fired up about that, what you going to do about you? And that's the question that hit me in the chest. And I didn't have an answer for it at the moment. But to answer your question about significant decisions, I decided in that moment that I'm going to figure it out because I don't want to be that guy.
Hmm.
And there is something that I aspire to. And I was taught better. And there have been examples. And I need to tap into what I need to do to get that. So that was a significant decision, which it didn't solve everything in the moment. But what it did was turn me around and face me in a different direction. So that was a significant moment. And then fast forward to just recently, within the last 16 months, I, like I said earlier, I was in the corporate space while doing all of this at the same time. I made a significant leap of faith, jumped out of the corporate space because I was at this crossroads in my life where I'm like, okay, what what could happen if I put 210% into this? I know that I'm called to do it. I know that it's my passion. I know the purpose. I see the path. What happens if I walk it like all the way? And so that has been a significant decision in this season of my life, which has actually opened the door for even more growth because I'm realizing now in this last year and a half that this walk right now, this entrepreneurial journey, is probably more about me growing myself than about me growing a business.
Hmm.
So those are very two significant moments in my life where decisions were made that I believe are pivotal in the way I move from a holistic standpoint, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, physically.
It's powerful. Again, I love the intrinsic understanding that you have that the journeys that we go under are just that, journeys. So it's not about what you're going to get as a result, but it's about who you become as a result
Right.
of that journey. Whether it's writing a book, whether it's starting a business, whether it's becoming married, or whatever choice decisions you make. So I love how you constantly bring it back to the intrinsic understanding the value.
Yeah. Yeah, that's that at the core. I think at the core, I did a post not too long ago and I was like, listen, at the core, there's so many ideologies that people are getting you to subscribe to, or they feel like you should check this box or check that box, or cater to this group or cater to this group or this person. I was like, at the core of all of that, like sometimes you just got to set all that down and ask yourself, what kind of man do I want to be?
Mm,
Like, how do I want to show up? Like,
right.
and then work backwards and put the pieces in place that get you there, you know. And it may not always subscribe to this ideology or check this box or meet the needs of this group, but at the end of the day, if you are comfortable and you are happy with and you are settled in the fact that I'm showing up in the right way, at the end of the day, that's really what's most important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you and I was introduced through a really interesting way, a
Yes.
connection. I mean, we're not far from each other, geography wise, but it took someone from around the world
Yeah,
to make the introduction, to make the connection.
indeed.
And so I'm big on connections. My company is King Connections, you know, and so I understand the importance of building connections. And I don't say network, I say connections. I look at those two things as totally different.
Okay.
Networking is more about, here's my information, here's what I do, give me your information, you exchange contact information. That's networking. Connecting is much more on a deeper, personal, as you say, intimate level with someone.
Yeah.
And you understand what they do and the value that they bring, and you build social capital around that. And so I'm very methodical, strategic, and intentional about how I go about building my connections. I came up with 8 key characteristics that I determined that before I connect with an individual, they must have at least 2 of these, or I can't connect with them.
Gotcha.
Right. Then I
Mhm.
had to do my own self-reflection and say, well, do I exhibit these things as well?
Right. Right.
And put myself on a journey to make sure I do. And it's always a journey. So now, with that being said, my question now becomes, in your world of building relationships and connections, are there any characteristics that you come up with that you are saying that before I connect with this person, they must have these?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say for one, for me, is the willingness to serve.
Mm, mm,
And you talked about, which I love that you just described, the difference between networking and connections. Because often in networking, the the goal is not always necessarily to serve as much as it is to gain.
right, right,
So in networking, I'm like, listen, how can I flip King into a client, right? As opposed
right.
to how what is it that King needs that I might be able to provide?
Mm,
And I'm learning to really appreciate being in spaces where people are like, "Hey, listen, man, let's talk. Let's learn each other." And if there's something that I can do to enhance what I discover through this learning process, then I'm here for that. And that's a big one for me because what I've been able to have, which I appreciate, when I jumped out of the corporate space, the thing that I've almost maybe appreciate the most is that I've had some of the most engaging and enriching conversations in these last 18 months, or let's call it 10 months, than I've had in the last 10 years. Because now I'm meeting individuals who fit into that category. Because there was a period of time, I'll be quite honest with you, there was some folk when I jumped out of the corporate space that were like, you're wasting your time having these conversations. What's the ROI? Did you get a client out of it? Did you get business out of it? Were you able to tap into their network? I'm like, honestly, bro, that's not why I set up the one-on-one. I was genuinely interested in this person, what they do, how they serve, and sometimes, and I'm not saying, obviously we have businesses to build, right? So obviously I'm not saying forget all of that. But at the same time, man, the person who has service at the core of who they are and how they show up is going to be a very different kind of person than the person who is like, "Oh, great to meet you, King. Um, here's what you can do for me." Very different
Absolutely.
scenario, right? And so for that service mindset for me is one. The other thing is, if I had to pick another one that's right at the top, is somebody who is somebody who's relationship oriented.
Mm,
And you talked about, again, I'm using what the definition you just shared with connections. That's very different than me just saying, "Hey, here's my number. Great to meet you. Good to see you, man. Let's connect one day." As opposed to, "Hey, you know what? Let's seriously get together. Let's have a conversation. I want to learn more about you." And those conversations become periodic in nature, and not necessarily periodic in nature because I'm trying to do the 7 touch. I'm trying to go through the 7 touch rule so that I can tell you something. But
right,
because I actually want to, like, I like this dude, King. Like, this is a good dude. Like, I need good dudes around me,
right, right.
And so for me, those are very important in terms of making connections.
Appreciate you sharing those, because as you said, the older we get, the more we value relationships. And what's interesting is the less you have too, by the same
That's
token.
very
You have
true.
so many when you're young. The older you get, people go in, coming out of your life for a very variety of reasons.
Hmm.
And wisdom should come in helping you to discern who you should keep in your life and who you really want to make those investments into, and be intentional about serving.
That's
You
right.
know, because you don't
That's
want
right.
to be a server to someone who's just a taker, not consistently. You know, you don't want to do that. And one of the things I do with my clients, I help them to identify the best strategic partners for them to help them execute their higher purpose.
Got you.
So again, my role is to really sit down and really understand the from an organic context and a higher purpose perspective, what do you want to do with your business? And then I'm always thinking about, let's build a system around it to make sure it runs more efficiently, effectively, and is scalable. But then at the same time, you need to make the right relationships and tap into people's social capital so you can have exponential growth.
Yeah.
And
I love
so
it.
now, with that context being said, who would be a great strategic partner for you?
Good question. Strategic partner for me would be individuals who are looking to make impact, community impact. Because although I live in the relationship building and men's empowerment spaces, the part of the advantage, or if you will, of building up individuals in those spaces is because they're very heavily woven into the fabric of community, which is heavily
Mhm.
woven into the fabric of society. And so if there's a strong family, a strong man, a strong family, a strong marriage, a strong home, the conglomerate of that equals down the line strong community, strong society. And so individuals who are really looking to build in that area in whatever way, right? It might not be relationship building, but what they bring to society. Like, for example, with what you're doing and everything that you're doing, right? You're looking at the big picture and what this is going to do for the city, what this is going to do for communities, what this is going to do for leaders, and how collaboration is going to affect change. So those kinds of individuals I love to partner with because we have the same destination, like we talked about before we started the conversation. The destination is the same, right? So if you're going down North Avenue, you know, to get to Graffiti Alley, and I'm going down Charles Street, you know, yeah, we're going different directions, but we're gonna meet at Graffiti Alley. And so I want to partner with those kinds of individuals who see that bigger picture and understand um, what the result of this can be.
Excellent, excellent. Now, I noticed each time we've talked, each time we've engaged, and you know, you've even gone out of your way to send me some connections,
Hmm.
you know, which I appreciate. Thank you for that. But I know that you bring a certain energy to all the conversations. Um, there's the energy of a positive state. You know, you said earlier you're juggle between 7 and 10.
Hmm.
So I'm just curious to know, with the world the way it is right now, with all the negative media that's out there trying to enter our minds and control us and try to have us thinking negative thoughts, what do you do in the morning to kind of put your mind, filter out all that negative noise and stay in a positive state that you talked about being, that you are now?
Good question. So I'm a man of faith, and I'm not pushing religion on anybody because that's not what this is about. But I do some reading in the morning, and typically that reading is going to be somewhat aligned to either mindset from a spiritual perspective or mindset from a psychological or emotional perspective. So whether that be some devotions, whether that be some Bible reading, um, something along those lines, right? That just kind of gets me in this place of, okay, here's where I am. Here's the energy that I want to reside in for the day. And here are the things that I need to have top of mind in order to see that energy fulfilled as as consistently as possible, because we don't get it perfect. I may do that and then an hour later the world ends, figuratively speaking. But that's some of what I try to do. I try to spend some of that time in the morning doing that, getting this in the right space. The thing I'm about to add to it, which I fell away from, is actually doing something physical as well, in addition to that. Now, and at full transparency, I've fallen away from that. So whether that be taking a walk, exercising, doing some push-ups, whatever it is, I was doing that in conjunction with that for a while, and then fell off. So I got to add that piece back as well. But that's typically what I do.
Excellent. Now we're down to the last two questions. These two questions to me help me learn a lot about an individual, not from a judgment context, but just gives me the data I look for as far as understanding who this person really is. Right.
Mhm.
Now I'm gonna set the context first, then I'm gonna ask the question. I
Sure.
want to make sure that the question can be kind of confusing initially. And the question is there a kinkin that you would like to meet? Now, what I mean by that is not a play on my name or my company's name,
Hmm.
but a kin connection is a title or a term I refer to an individual who's achieved a certain success in life that, whether it's personal, professional, or career wise, where you say, if I was to connect with this individual and we were to co-create, we can make some great things happen. So it's not the fan that we meet this person and being like, well,
Right.
I admire what you do, and it's that fandom. It's more of, I bring something to the table of value, you have something to the table of value, let's build, right? And so, because I've developed a methodology that anyone is a connection, especially folks who have a higher purpose, especially folks who are conscious leaders. People want to connect with other people who think like that, regardless of whatever state or stage they are in their lives. People want to make those connections, and I have a methodology for getting those individuals. Like so for example, mine would be Magic Johnson,
Okay.
and not because he's a famous basketball player, because actually I didn't like Magic Johnson when he was a basketball player. I respected his skills, but I was a Pistons fan.
Got you.
But
Okay.
it's about who he is now, the man he is now. He's the person who's an entrepreneur, who's a financial counselor, who is a connector, who is a community builder. So I felt if I met Magic, I don't want to be, I'm here and he's here. No,
Hmm.
I can help you build communities. We can do some great things together. Let's co-create. So now, within that context, who would be your kin connection that you would like to meet?
Man, that's a good question. As, as you were talking, there's a load of people kind of running through my head. Hmm. I would love. I'd love to connect with TD Jakes. So I'm gonna
Hmm,
give. Can I give you more than one?
absolutely.
Okay. So on the high end, if you want to call it that spectrum, with him being the public figure that he is, I would love to connect with TD Jakes. Now, my reasoning behind that is, um, he has, being clergy, has been able to find himself in several different spaces that you probably wouldn't think would be interconnected. Like, he's preaching on one end but making movies on the other, right?
Right.
And somebody with that level of reach in terms of uh, being able to speak to all of these different audiences and still speak as himself, like he's not shape shifting in these spaces. Like, he is that orator, he is that um, encourager, he is that person who wants to build and wants to see people thrive and grow. And I would love to connect with this guy because I just feel like, one, with his guidance and what he has already accomplished, and two, with the things that I've accomplished and the vision that I have for how this reach can be, I think that would be a phenomenal connection. And then, locally, there are several educators, that have done significant work in the local area where I am. So I'm in Maryland. So in the local area where I am, there's certain individuals that, I'd love to connect with. There's a gentleman in the DC area. Um, I'm trying to think of his last name. He's the current principal of a charter school in Washington D.C. and has done some significant work in the D.C. Maryland area with youth. with business development, with character development. I'm like, man, that's right up my alley. Those are the things that I just live, breathe, and sleep. So those are two. Richard Wright, the Richard Wright Schools principal. I think Dr. Harris is his name. I'd love to connect with either of those two or both.
Excellent, excellent. Then my last and final question would be: of all the books you read in your life,
Hmm.
what book would you say to our listening audience? This is a book that you have to read. That's been the most influential, the most impactful, or it may be a book you just read recently that you still feel the same way. Like, this is a book I just need to share with people because this is just really having this kind of impact in my life. Which book would that be?
That's a tough one. Um, Man, that's a tough one. The Psychology of Money, only because I'm excuse me, almost done with that now. That's good. Anointed for Business. Um, I know you said one, but I'm like, man, I don't even. I got so many that I could think of, man. What you say? What is it? What you say when you talk to yourself?
Hmm.
That's a good one. That's him Helm's Letter, I think is the last name
Hmm.
of the author. What you say when you talk to yourself. Yeah, but there's a few, man, and then there's some that I've been kind of going back to, you know. But yeah, I'll leave it there because you said one. So I give you a whole library if you want.
No, no, I definitely feel you. That shows I love to talk to readers. Readers are thinkers, in most cases that I've met. But I definitely want to thank you for your investment of time and energy with joining me on this show. You've answered some questions with honesty, I feel, with authenticity, and well, a lot of wisdom. I think that our listening audience who watches this podcast, whether it's live right now or later on as a replay or recording, they're gonna get a lot of value out of hearing what you have to say. So what I want to do is I want to give you an opportunity as we close out to give you the opportunity to share any closing thoughts you may have to our listening audience, as well as your contact information for those who really resonate with what you're saying and want to build and want to connect with you.
Sure. Thank you. First of all, thank you for the opportunity. It's my pleasure to be here, and I'm honored for you to give me the opportunity to speak to your audience. That is phenomenal. Again, I don't take that lightly, so thank you for that opportunity. I would say last thoughts, man, is behavioral change without mindset change is not sustainable long term. And I say that because we are often groomed to make behavioral changes. And I'm not saying that's wrong, because as your perspective changes, your approach is going to change. Your behaviors are going to change. It's a trickle down effect. But we often don't start on the perspective and the mindset side. We start on the behavioral side because, okay, if I need to do something with King, or I need to produce this thing for King, or I need to look a certain way to King, let me go ahead and do this real quick. Over time, you're gonna realize, nah, bro ain't, like, he ain't real. Like, that's not him. He don't even think that way. He's not even prepared himself to do that. He was just trying to fill a fulfill a need or appease a person or something like that. And so it's important to really understand that if you are not um, if you're not satisfied with the results that you're getting from your approach, that you should probably go back and check your perspective or your mindset, because it's not sustainable long term, and one thing follows the other. So that I would leave with that. And then the way to get a hold of me, social media is a good way for those who are social media folks. um, you can look up my name, Oliver Marcelle, and follow my personal accounts. But if you want to follow Denoli, it's Denoli LLC. That's everywhere on social media. That is also YouTube. That is LinkedIn. Denoli LLC. You can find me everywhere.
Well, again, thank you very much, Oliver, for being, again, your investment of time, energy, the wisdom you shared. I love the last thought you shared. That's a very powerful, powerful statement. You said the change in behavior does not. Say that again. I'm going to make sure I get that correct.
Behavioral change without mindset change is not sustainable long term.
Love that. Love that. That's wise words been spoken there, brother. Thank you for
Thank you.
that. Listener audience, thank you again for tuning in to another episode of King Connections podcast. Until our next episode, I want to wish everyone a blessed and productive life. Thank you for all.